the presence of giants throughout history in legends, myths, and also just the standard writings of the world's foremost historians that there's no embellishment or mythology associated with are always talking about the giants, the ancient ones. They refer to them as the gods, little g's, when the gods walked amongst men. And what has been problematic is the standard answer is, well, where are all the bones if these guys exist? Well, I'll tell you for a fact that when I started talking about the bones on Coast to Coast, especially in Lovelock, Nevada, the red-haired giants actually had mummies of the red-haired giants. Within, I believe I was told 2 to 3 weeks, this was told by an insider, he said, do you realize we were given a task to go out and find all those things that you might bring up to undermine you? And it was a fact that people have been known for years, the Lovelock giants, the red-headed giants. It's like that all over the world. Now, why would the Smithsonian be covering this up?
Right.
Well, John Wesley Powell, who was the great explorer of the desert Southwest, became the head of the Smithsonian Institute. James Smithson, from which the Smithsonian is named, gave quite a bit of money, and then from there, the U.S. government got involved. You fast forward to Powell's doctrine that simply everybody stayed in their part of the world and didn't travel very far, Basically, maybe they didn't have frequent flyer passes, but the point is that it was isolationism versus diffusionism. That's a fancy word for saying, how can we tell the world's population the biggest lie to ultimately control them? So Powell set up the Powell Doctrine, and he basically, I'm quoting kind of very rough here, but he said, look, everybody stayed in their corner of the world, and they really didn't travel much. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. We know from ancient history, we know the presence of the Canaanites, we know the presence of the Phoenicians. We know you were just on Sardinia with Tim Alberino and the Gen 6 tour over there, and Sardinia was the jumping off point for the giants. Interestingly enough, it's also where James Cameron was starting his search for Atlantis. And the Basques in northern Spain and the Sardinians believe they're the Atlanteans too. And the Atlanteans have a unique genetic structure. And so it's my contention that people have got to understand that the reason ancient history is covered up is to keep us from coming to the knowledge of truth. And see, the last thing these guys will admit, number one, that God's real, or they'll vilify the God of heaven. Number two, that Jesus is just a prophet instead of the Son of God, the ultimate prophet. That the Bible is true. It's not total. I mean, what man can understand the totality of God?
Well, if we could, he wouldn't be much of a God, would he?
Amen. But the thing is that God's basis is mercy, truth, and justice. So I believe we're in the time period that God is going to reveal the hidden secrets of antiquity to show the lies that have determined us. Because, it is His nature. Jesus is the truth. Jesus is the truth. Truth is the most, how should we say this, non-existent commodity in the world now because everybody lies. So may I hold this up a minute?
Sure, yeah.
The interesting thing about this, I just want to explain where you can see it. We'll put up a screen image, but the Egyptian presence in the Americas and the Pacific Rim, the lower image shows the Egyptians taking a giant mummy into the caves in the Grand Canyon. The top image shows the military helicopters taking the giant out, taking this to Area 51. This was detailed to me after I had done a talk radio program on Coast to Coast, not the Egyptian part, but the excavation of the giants and the exhumation of them. Most people should know that 90% of the Grand Canyon is off limits, even to the Native Americans. I think Tom and I were told that there's some areas that the Native Americans are allowed to go to once or twice a year for a ceremony, but that's it. Excuse me, who owns that? The idea of the Great Smithsonian cover-up, everybody's familiar with the article about the Kincaid expedition, but what they're not aware of primarily is the hundreds and hundreds of newspaper articles across the American landscape of details of giants. And one of the most fascinating things, now I've been at this 46 years, but when I came upon an 1877 story that literally dropped my mouth, caused my jaw to drop. It was about a live sighting in 1877, a 21-foot giant. Now this is almost too hard to believe. A triangular mouth, tusks, a beard 6 feet long, vertical eyes, slits, and pupils the size of, they said, between cantaloupe and watermelon. Okay, that all is contained in this DVD. And then what's also imperative is that over the years, being on talk radio, that's how Tom and I met, officially, that people listen on all the different venues or whatever that open up, and there are a lot of people wanting to get right with the Lord before they go to be with Him. It doesn't matter if they're intelligence, military, just people that have been scientists. And when you see grown men cry, weeping about the things that they created, the hybrids and the laboratories and the different, hundreds of subterranean labs around the world, I mean, it gets your attention, So this is a different DVD than what the other ones we've done, because we go into the Cosmos Club. The Cosmos Club is in Washington, D.C.
I was going to ask you about that, because it seems like this is a really big conspiracy for one guy, John Wesley Powell.
Powell forward.
Yeah. I mean, how much help has there been? I mean, who else is in on this?
It's like, who isn't? Cosmos Club is kind of like, and they now allow women, but initially it was just men. But it's a good old boys club. A lot of them were into the world of secret societies and stuff. Powell set up the Cosmos Club, and until the eyewitness to the Smithsonian cover-up, who was down in the secret warehouses of the Smithsonian and showing the Egyptian artifacts and everything, he stayed at the Cosmos Club. And when he was there, I forget which Supreme Court justice. I mean, these are the who's who in the world. And the American landscape was so littered with giants and artifacts, from everything from Roman artifacts, Egyptian artifacts, Canaanite artifacts, Philistine artifacts. I mean, you name it. Even the Decalogue stone, that was in the United States, the Ten Commandments. But even going back beyond the myths, legends, and all of the great structures in Mesoamerica, the pyramids. And for the record, the Inca, the Aztec, and the Maya never stated that they created those structures. They said the giants who came from the East created them. By the way, they were blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And so why this is critical, it's kind of two-part. They're getting a twofer. One, the thing is, the first part is the cover-up, the Egyptians in the Grand Canyon, and also the Pacific Rim. Maui, the navigator, under Captain Rata. Captain Rata was basically Ptolemy III's chief naval captain. They sailed the world. Everyone who found Maui had his own signature. And it was basically a symbol of the sun and the stars in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere, obviously differing. And it basically said wherever he went, it said this is a signature of Maui. Maui, the island. I mean, in, let's say, Indonesia, in the Hawaiian Islands. And what's interesting to me is, I don't want to write a book about this, but when I talk about cannibalism, the spread of cannibalism was initiated by the giants, it was implemented by the giants, and all of the cultures from, the Americas, all the way into Indonesia, all the way into Japan, China. I mean, cannibalism was a global thing. And now it's coming back in the news. And as I say, the gates of hell, and by the way, Tom Horn, when he said that on the radio with me, that was it was seriously, it was a time lock on a vast amount of information.